Hey, how can couples stop fighting? This is Mastering Thought with Dr. Mark Waller and me, Christina Black. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Fine, how are you?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
So this is kind of a continuation of the last uh, show that we did. And the
Mm-hmm.
last show was Why Do Couples Fight?
Mm-hmm.
And this one is How Do They Stop Fighting, which I guess is the natural extension of why they fight. So,
Yeah, I'm
and
looking
we
forward to this.
it was kind of a cliffhanger. So I wanted to
Yeah.
start with a little story because this is going to come back at the end here. So lately, now you're going to think I'm crazy, and I am, but uh, recently I've had this pain in my foot, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't figure out where is this pain coming from. I don't understand. What am I doing differently? I've suddenly got this pain in my foot. Well, about 3 nights ago, in the middle of the night, I'm up, and all of a sudden it pops into my head. It's because I'm doing this new exercise in my weight routine.
Mm.
So I stopped doing the new exercise and the pain started to go away. Okay, so we're going to circle back to that because our brains have the ability to work on problems offline, and that's what we're going to do to figure this whole thing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
show me what you got.
Okay, I
Let's pick.
will. So, but anyway, I want to start back with what we talked about last time, if I can get my thing to cooperate here. And remember this diagram here.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for couples to get into a fight, this structure right here called the amygdala has to be triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And the triggering is fight or flight. Now, we'll discuss this at a later time, but some of us, when we fight, trigger flight, and some of us trigger fight. Anyway, the
Mm-hmm.
amygdala is responding to a perceived threat. You remember that from the last time?
Yes.
Okay. So So we've got this thing happening in the limbic system. And what I alluded to last time is that the memories that this is tied to are part of the limbic system here. So I want to define this
Mm-hmm.
in a different way to lead us kind of out of the problem that we've gotten ourselves into. So, let me clear the drawing. And so what we have here is a little psychological term called schema. So these memories form what is called a schema. And what is a schema? A schema is an emotional structure, a cognitive framework, a plan, an emotional model that comes from parental interaction. And so what we're doing is when we're children is we come up with this schema that we apply to various things, and then when the amygdala gets triggered, up comes the schema, and this is how we deal with the situation.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a mode of operation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it's sort of like we create a model of a world as children, but then we create these little mini models for different
Yeah.
situations, and
Right.
those are
Right.
called those are called schema.
Okay.
So we're gonna give it another name here because
All right.
seems too formal. So now here's the way the brain works. And the best metaphor I could come up with, I don't know if you've ever played, now I call this sandbag, but it's actually called cornhole. Have you ever heard of this game before?
Yeah, you stand about 20, 30 feet away and try your best.
Okay, so here we have this cornhole target here, and there are three holes, a big one and two little ones. And so I think what you throw when you actually play this is you throw bean bags, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you stand back and you throw beanbags and you try to get the beanbag to go in one of the holes. Now, this is exactly the way the brain works. Only in the brain, the holes are not clean cut like this. They're constructed from nonlinear dynamics, so they're kind of fuzzy.
Mhm.
And so what's happening is life is throwing these beanbags at us. And as the beanbags go into one of the holes, then one of those schemas gets triggered.
Mhm.
So think of it another metaphor would be this, this hole right here for rejection, for instance. That would be like a catcher in a baseball game, the big catcher's mitt, and he's trying to catch the ball. So anyway,
Mhm.
life is throwing beanbags at us in the forms of whatever circumstances we're in.
Sure.
And if the beanbag goes in one of the holes, then a schema gets triggered and we have this emotional reaction. How am I doing so far?
Yeah, it's making sense.
Okay, so now let's add to this metaphor a little bit. So let's say the schema is not a hole in a piece of plywood, but it's a pothole in the road.
Mhm.
So now here's a question for you, Christina. What is the one piece of information this driver needs so he doesn't fall into the pothole?
He needs to know how to navigate away from the pothole.
But in order to navigate away from it, what's the piece of information he needs to know about the pothole?
That it's there.
Yes, he needs to know where the pothole is, doesn't he?
Mhm.
He needs to know that it's there. And so if and I'm assuming the driver is a man, it could be a female too. So the driver can see the pothole, so they steer around the pothole. So the pothole is like the schema in the brain. So we've got this emotional pothole that gets developed by our interaction with one of our parents. And if we go back and we look at this example here, we can see that the most likely pothole is the one labeled rejection.
Mhm. Right.
Now, this could be different for different people. So what we have here is we have a driver navigating around this pothole so they don't drive the car into the pothole. And that's literally the way we're living our lives, if
Mhm.
we know what we're doing. So we
Right.
know we have this pothole in the limbic system from our early childhood development. And if we know it's there, then we can navigate around it. Are you seeing where I'm going with this?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm really enjoying this.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's like you can see it coming when something's happening within your marriage or a conflict or whatever. Like you can see it far away. Like, oh, okay, this could happen. And as it gets closer, it's like, okay, this is more likely to happen. And instead of just freaking out and being like, oh, I'm going to do the thing I don't want to do, it's more like, okay, whatever tool you're about to share is going to be the way that you avoid the pothole. That's my guess.
Well, you're way out in front of me. You're exactly right. So
I get
basically,
in
what we
trouble.
was what's that? Go
I
ahead.
ruin it for my family. They don't like it.
So what we've established here is that when we have an argument, when a couple has an argument, they stumble into their own pothole.
Mm-hmm.
The pothole has been constructed through their interaction with their parents in the emotional brain, the limbic system, and the the reaction they're having is about the parent and not the partner that they're standing there with at the time of the interaction.
Right.
So what you've done is you very successfully keyed in to exactly how this works. And how this works is to get out of this, we need to see the pothole.
Right.
Okay, so let's go to the next thing that we need to figure this out. So let's analyze the pothole a little bit. So here's the schema, aka the pothole. And the pothole is made up of these four things: perception, feelings, defensive behavior, and a goal. Okay, so if we go back to this example here, the main pothole is rejection, right?
Right.
So that becomes our perception. So I'm going to have you help me fill this out. So our perception is rejection. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the feeling or the defensive behavior or the goal? Any ideas?
Maybe some feelings would be like, I'm not good enough, I'm not wanted,
Perfect.
I'm too much. Defensive behavior could be either addressing what you don't like about it, or shutting down, or not sharing your feelings with others, or maybe even yourself, like stuffing down your own feelings.
Okay. Excellent. So far we've got rejection, not wanted, and the defensive behavior in this case is going to be anger.
Mm-hmm.
So when you feel rejected, you get angry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's expand on this a little bit. Not wanted could also be a feeling you said of not good enough, and also like nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Nobody
this
cares.
is going to be individual. An individual
Yeah.
is going to decide which phrase works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what's the goal?
Well, I suppose the goal would be to not feel rejected,
What's the word for that?
accepted, appreciate, approval.
Or
It's a.
I think you said that acceptance.
I did, yeah.
Sorry about my handwriting.
It's all right.
Okay,
You're a
now
doctor.
what's important about this is that all of these things make up the pothole. So
Mm-hmm.
this looks like it's linear, doesn't it? One thing leads to another, leads to another. Now, conceptually, it does, but in the brain, they all occur at the same time to form the pothole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I could almost see it just being like a lot of Venn diagrams, and so it's not like a perfect circle that it makes, but like kind of like in your car graphic, that there's certain areas that are pushed out farther and certain areas that are like concave.
Okay. So here we have we're in this pothole. Now, how do we get out of this? So we've already established the way to get out of this is to recognize the fact that we're in the pothole. And in order to do that, we need to connect the dots. Okay, well, how do we connect the dots? So the first step is to realize that we have been triggered and that we're going into the pothole, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next step is to realize if we're having this emotional reaction, it's coming from our childhood. It's not coming from the other person. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
if you say my husband makes me mad, that's not true. Your husband can't make you mad. Your anger comes from your reaction to your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your husband was not your husband, but let's say was a 4-year-old daughter, and your 4-year-old daughter said, "Mommy, I hate you." Well, that wouldn't make you angry, would it? Because your frame around your daughter is different than the frame around your husband.
Mm-hmm.
So if your husband said he hated you, you would have a completely different reaction because your frame
Yeah.
of reference is different.
Right.
And so the key to getting out of this is to realize that if you're having an emotional reaction, it means, one of these things has been triggered and you
Mm-hmm.
have driven the car into the pothole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any questions so far before I do wrap this around to where we started?
Well, let's see. Our schemas are our potholes, and once we know what makes up our own potholes, then we know how to avoid them or realize when we're in them when we get triggered. I think I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, so what we need to do now is every time we do what I did with my sore foot, every time I felt that pain, I kept thinking, okay, what is this related to? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what, and then what happened was offline, my brain went to work on the problem, and then paff, in the middle of the night, boom, it popped into my mind.
Right.
And the psychological issues like this work exactly the same way. And so what happens is we pose the question to our subconscious mind, and it goes to work on the problem, and then sometime later the answer pops into our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do the same thing with this. So how do we get out of these fights is every time we have that emotional reaction and we know we've fallen into the pothole, even if we don't do this until the next day, it's okay. We just sit and ask the question to our subconscious mind, how does this relate to my childhood? And if you already know
Mm-hmm.
more specifically it relates to your mother and father, you just say, how does it relate to my mother and father? And then don't try to analyze it or ask or figure it out. You just pose the question. And then sometimes later, your subconscious mind will actually answer the question for you. And suddenly you'll be able to connect the dots between your
Mm-hmm.
husband or your girlfriend and your mother or your father, wherever the problem came from in your history. So really,
Man.
this requires two things. Number one, you have to take complete responsibility that this reaction is about you and it's coming from your early childhood emotional programming. And then you pose the question, okay, show me how this is related. Help me connect the dots. And
Mm-hmm.
you answer that question, you ask the question over and over every time you have the reaction. And eventually there's a light bulb moment where you see the relationship between your current circumstance and the way you were programmed as a child. And it just
Mm-hmm.
presents itself. You just see it.
Whew, excuse me. That makes a lot of sense, and I haven't mentioned on this show before, but I do a nervous system therapy called craniosacral therapy, and that's pretty similar, actually, to sometimes what we do in a session with someone else. They'll be hurting somewhere, and we just ask the question, "Why is this hurting?" And you don't get the answer right away all the time, but the non-conscious will float the answer up. Um, so it's cool to see that function. It's just a human function, so we're able to use it in a lot of different ways.
Uh-huh. So the idea that excellent, and I'm glad you brought that in. And there's actually many therapies that use the same principle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the key here is to understand how your brain creates these reactive patterns and where they come from. And when you intellectually understand that, now you know why you're posing the question. So
Right.
you're not posing the question, why am I so screwed up? Or why is my wife so angry? You're saying, okay, I'm being triggered. Show me what I need to know about this trigger
Yeah.
and where it comes from, and then you will get the answer.
Love that. And so, I mean, really, every mood we're in comes with its own schema. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so then we can be aware that when we reach the ones that we don't want to be falling into because it causes problems, And that's when we use the tool of
And
asking.
you raise a good point, but there's some good news there, because basically we're dealing with the 5-year-old brain, so there are only 2 or 3 schemas.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's so
there's,
cool.
and then we're gonna talk about later, if you're a person who prefers fight over flight, you're going to see that you have different schemas than the person
Mm-hmm.
who prefers the other method, and it all fits in. But we only have, as human, from my experience, 24 years of working with people, they only have 3, maybe 4 emotional reactions that they struggle with in their relationships. And once you isolate them, they can find out where they came from and then set themselves free.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And it's so important, the part where you said don't try to answer it.
Right. Right.
Obviously
Because
we're
then we
so
just get lost in our head trying to figure something out and we can't figure it out.
absolutely, or be so creative and just like think you might be close, but be off the mark a little bit and then have to circle around again later.
Or, there's another way of asking this question as well, and that is make it even more general and say, what am I supposed to be learning? I'm fighting again with my wife. What am
Yeah.
I supposed to be learning from this that I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
And instead
And
of what we, go ahead.
oh,
So what we do is we focus on the other person instead of understanding that every time we have an emotional reaction, it's an opportunity to go deeper and set ourselves free by
mm-hmm.
posing these questions and getting the answers as to what's going. Now, the benefit of this is not only do we set ourselves free, but once we're free, I can look at the other person and can say, wait a minute, my assumptions about their behavior were not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
They're
You
based
can
on
see
my pothole that I'm in. Once
mm-hmm.
I'm out of the pothole and I look at what they're doing, I see something completely different.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one beautiful thing about doing that kind of self work is that yeah, you're solving the problem with your spouse, but then when you get to the bottom of these fears or the way you act, you appreciate your day to day and moment to moment life more anyway. And so it's like
Right.
everybody wins.
Well, and you start living in the moment, because when you're in the remembered past or the imagined future, you're never present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I could see how having some of those fears hanging in the back of your head when you're entering into a situation will maybe like that percentage amount take away from you living in the moment where you're at, even if you want to be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that wraps that up.
Actually, can I just throw one more thing in there?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Um, at least in the body work I do, and I'd be curious to see if you think the same thing, but there's a huge emphasis on like when you're getting answers back from your non-conscious, it's so important not to be judgmental of them and to just be a curious observer and give it its fair shot.
My experience of that is that when people, and oftentimes when I'm talking to them about this principle, they'll get an answer. All of a sudden, it'll be there. And the way that I see it experienced is they laugh and they cry at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they cry? They cry because they've gone into the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly they're experiencing the pain. Why do they laugh? They laugh because they see how ridiculously it is being applied in their present situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't actually find, yeah, I think that's great advice. Don't judge what's coming up. But I my experience is people have this huge sense of relief when they finally
Mm-hmm.
connect the dots, and it just makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I remember a week or two ago, I was really struggling in this session with this woman, and I couldn't get her to bear down on this concept. She kept telling me she intellectually understood it, and that was good enough, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we're having this clash, which doesn't happen very often, but she had a strong personality. I was willing to go into that space with her. And in the middle of this heated discussion, all of a sudden her eyes go like this. And she has this memory of her father.
Mm.
And all of a sudden it made sense. And it
Mm-hmm.
changed the trajectory of everything right in the middle of the conversation.
So cool.
It was very cool. And I
Mm-hmm.
see that type of thing all the time.
Mm-hmm. I get to see my own version of it. It's like the tonic of my life.
By the way,
Not my life.
Christina, why don't you explain before we go, why don't you explain what you do and where this comes from for you?
Sure. So like about the nervous system therapy?
Yeah, what specifically you do body work and energy work and stuff. Just what
Yeah.
is that and what do you do?
I've done massage therapy since 2005, and have always really loved it. And about 4 years ago, my friend gave me an invitation to take a class on craniosacral therapy. And I didn't really know that much about it, but she gave me a good enough reason to be curious. So she and I went to the first class together, and I knew I wanted to take the longer one. And I mean, really, when you're working with the craniosacral system, it's the interface between your brain and all the other systems in your body. So the scope is massive. I mean, I used to be able to help tight shoulders and some headaches, and now I have the ability to make positive impacts on people who have had strokes or have autism or have been through surgeries or have autoimmune disease. I haven't taken the courses on conception yet, but there's work that you can even do to help people who are not able to get pregnant. And and yeah, like just even some of the other sort of movements you do on the cranial bones, it can help with your mental health so much. And it does work with the energies of the body. So I had to learn a lot about bioelectricity and kinetic energy and whatever the all other energies that our bodies use and can impact if your tissue is tight or not. And it's really a great um, melting pot to see how like your soul, your mind, your emotions, your body, they're all one unit and inextricably connected. So it's been a very fun segue for me to want to learn more about psychology and human behavior. And then not too many years later, you came along and had this great idea to do this. So I just feel like it's expanding my knowledge in so many ways and it's helping so many people. I wish everyone would try it at least once, wherever they are.
Well, we hope everybody joins us and asks questions in the comments and look at the last video we did because it's kind of a precursor to this one
Mm-hmm.
and a sort of an introduction. And also, I just wanted to mention that I've written a number of books. Three of them are The Dance, the Lion, the Unicorn, Mastering Thought, and Awakening.
So
And
good.
the Dance, the Lion, and the Unicorn is about relationships. Mastering Thought is about the voice in your head that sounds like you talking to you. And Awakening kind of combines the two and goes down sort of a mystical Eastern route. So check those out on Amazon if you would. And
So
that,
good.
and then stay tuned for the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.